Hey class, welcome back. I hope you guys are having a great day today. We're going to continue now in our lecture with session 2 of this week, looking at the second part of the Roman Empire. And today we're going to be looking at the Punic Wars. There are 3 Punic Wars. These are wars that Rome and fought against Carthage in North Africa. The Punic Wars, Punic means Carthage, and the Punic Wars really, at the end of them, really established the entire Roman Empire, especially in the western part of the Mediterranean, all the way out to Spain. They're going to then focus on the east and conquering areas of the east. But at the end of the Punic Wars, Rome really has a lot of territory, and is just going to continue to expand from there. So the Punic Wars are very important in the establishment of the Roman Empire. In the Punic Wars, you start seeing some different names pop up. One of them is Hannibal. You may have heard of him. Hannibal was a general from Carthage, and he invaded Italy through the top of the boot. And that is a very famous campaign that he did. He took all of his soldiers and his men through the Alps, crossed over the Alps, and came down into Italy through the top of the boot. One unique aspect of his campaign was that he brought elephants with him, and elephants, the famous elephants crossing the Alps. So that takes place in the Second Punic War. The Punic Wars were kind of one-sided for the most part. They were vicious wars. They were vicious battles, and many people were killed during the campaigns. But Rome pretty much would win. They did win every single one of these wars. So we're going to move into our PowerPoint. We'll look at the information here, the details of the Punic Wars. Okay, class, we're going to move now into the PowerPoint for Part 2 of Rome. Today we'll be discussing the Punic Wars. There were 3 Punic Wars. The 3 wars were fought between Rome and Carthage between 264 BC and 146 BC. So that's 118 years that Rome and Carthage were at war. There were three distinct wars with some time in between. It was basically a struggle for regional supremacy, and Rome would be the one that comes out on top. The Punic Wars, the first one, which led to the next and the next, began with economic friction over the island of Sicily and the grain trade. Sicily is an island off the tip of the boot of Italy, and they fought over that island. Carthage was a powerful force in North Africa and the western Mediterranean area. Carthage was settled by the Phoenicians, and if you remember back a couple weeks ago, we had talked about the Phoenicians. Well, Carthage was settled by them, and it was a strategic trade terminal in North Africa. Carthage is located on the ocean, on the Mediterranean Sea in North Africa. It's called Punic from the word Punicus, which means Carthaginians. So that's why it's called Punic. It doesn't mean punishment or to punish or anything. Punic means Carthaginians from the word Punicus. Okay, so here's a map of the western Mediterranean, basically from the heel of the boot of Italy all the way over to Spain. This over here will be the Strait of Gibraltar, where my arrow is going. And you can see the legend here. Carthage is the purple, and Rome is the red. So you can see that it has not spread very much yet. And this here is Sicily. This island here is Sicily. And so they fought over this island. You see Carthage owns some of it, and there's Syracuse on Sicily. But they fought over it. So we have Rome up here, the capital of Rome. capital of Italy, Rome, and then down here is Carthage, right here, North Africa. And so they're going to fight. Okay, the First Punic War was from 264 BC to 241 BC. And as I said, it was mainly fought over control of Sicily. Rome built a very powerful navy in 2 months to fight against the Carthaginians. They built 120 ships. And the Romans copied their ships from a captured Carthaginian ship. And there's 2 types of ships I want to mention because these are interesting ships for the warfare that they fought on the sea. And the first one is called a quinqueremes, which had 3 banks of oars, or tiers. The 2 top tiers would have 2 men per oar, and then the bottom tier would have 1 man per oar. And then there's the triremes, which were 3 rows of oars on each side, 1 man per oar, 170 total men. It was very fast and maneuverable. So these are the ships that they built, and they were able to move quickly and fight effectively. Here's a triremes, this graphic. So up here would be 2 men per oar, and then down here would be 1. I couldn't find a graphic of the other one, but this here is 2 meters long, so that oar, 2 meters is about 6 feet, so that oar would be quite long down into the water. The First Punic War lasted 23 years. Rome won the First Punic War. Rome's navy was now very powerful. Rome and Carthage were both financially exhausted after the First Punic War, and there's going to be 2 more to come. Carthage had to pay a high war reparation. That's the penalty that the winning side of a war puts on the losing side, and they have to pay it. So there was a high war reparation, basically to bankrupt them. Key reason for Roman victory was this. The leaders in Rome had a common goal, and they would risk their fortunes to invest in the war. So the wealthy, the elite, would put money into the building of ships and the machines of war and what you need to go to war, grain supplies and horses and wagons, and so you need all these things and weapons. They would need them, and they would need them built and made. And so the wealthy would invest their fortunes in doing this. But the Carthaginians, on the other hand, their elites, they would not risk their wealth for the common goal. Instead, they kept their wealth, leaving the armies to have to raise up their own equipment and whatever they had lined up for craftsmen making equipment or weapons or ships. They did not have the wealthy backing from their elites. Okay, so we'll now move into the Second Punic War. This was from 218 BC to 201 BC. Basically, the way this war played out was Hannibal captured a pro-Roman city called Saguntum, and that's in present-day Spain. Well, that city was pro-Roman. Well, Hannibal was Carthaginian. And so Hannibal captures this city. And so in response, Rome besieges Carthage in North Africa. So soldiers from Rome go and surround the city and besiege it. Hamilcar, who is actually Hannibal's dad, and he was a Carthaginian general in the First Punic War, went to Spain to rebuild an army. And so he rebuilds his army in Spain, and his son Hannibal begs his dad to bring the army to help fight Rome. So Hannibal takes the army and invades Italy, and this is very interesting, and this is very well known and famous account. He invades Italy from the north, which means he comes into the top of the boot. So he doesn't invade by the sea or by the tip of the foot or heel or down there on the map where we saw. Instead, he invades at the top of Italy. So he comes in from the north with 50,000 infantry, 9,000 cavalry, and 37 elephants. But there's a large mountain range that separates Italy from the rest of Europe, and that is the Alps. And so Hannibal crossed the Alps. He ended up losing half of his force crossing the Alps. But he made it, and it's very famous, Hannibal and his elephants crossing the Alps. And he found a favorable position that he wanted to stop at and kind of be on the defensive. And he wanted Rome to come to him and attack him. So here's just a artistic representation of Hannibal's forces crossing the Alps. You see them in the snow, and they're freezing, the elephants. So it's a very ambitious way to enter Italy. But he did. He entered Italy. So he set up his place where he wanted to fight and wanted Rome to come to him to fight. Well, there was a Roman general named Fabius Maximus, and he decided he's not going to attack Hannibal directly where Hannibal was, but instead he attacked Hannibal's supply lines and drew Hannibal's soldiers into battles on his, meaning Fabius's, on his favored ground. So not only did he attack his supply lines, but then he had Hannibal's soldiers come out to where he wanted to fight. And it basically just weakened Hannibal's forces. And then another Roman general, Scipio, he actually defeated Hannibal at the Battle of Zama in 202 BC. And then in 201 BC, the Second Punic War ended. So results of the Second Punic War. Carthage lost control of Spain and Western Mediterranean. So that map that we had up there, all that purple shaded area was Carthage. Well, now that belongs to Rome. Carthage had a small area in North Africa that they were allowed to stay in, basically kind of around Carthage area. Carthage lost its naval fleet. Again, they were forced to pay a high war reparation. And Hannibal was exiled by Rome. And in his, while being in exile, he committed suicide by poisoning himself. And today he is looked at as one of the greatest military generals for what he did. Even though he didn't win in the end, he was still looked at as a great military general. And here's another artistic representation of Hannibal. He's about to drink the poison that will kill him. And so that moves us into the Third Punic War, 149 to 146 BC. So this was kind of a short war. Now Carthage recovered pretty quickly from the Second Punic War, and when we think about the Carthaginians, they had lost some territory to one of Rome's allies, and Carthage basically wanted that territory back, and so they went and took the territory back, and that ally besieged Rome and said, hey, can you come help us? And so Rome comes to Carthage and offers peace terms. And their terms were that Carthage had to surrender 300 Carthaginian children to Rome as hostages. And then Carthage must destroy itself and relocate further inland from the North African coast. And the distance, they wanted Carthage to move 16 kilometers inland from the coast. They thought that would be far enough in that they would lose basically all their trade and their power to make war on the sea. And if they refused, then Rome was going to declare war and attack Carthage. Well, clearly, Carthage was not going to accept those terms. They reject the terms, and then it leads into the Third Punic War. So Rome declares war and lays siege to Carthage. And in Rome, in the Senate, there was a man named Cato the Elder and some other Roman senators. They continued to push that Carthage was a severe threat. But by this point, Carthage really was no match for Rome. Rome had become very powerful military and navy. They had besieged Rome besieged Carthage for a long time here. 2 years they laid siege to Carthage. And it actually became, later on, historians look at this as controversial. Did they really need to even do what they did? Because Carthage really just was no threat anymore. But they did. They besieged it, and it lasted 2 years. And Carthage was even more weak. And then finally, after 2 years, a young Roman general, his name was Scipio the Younger. And when I say young, I believe he was in his 20s, and he was a general. He commanded the campaign that besieged Carthage. And so they broke the siege and pushed into the city and slaughtered the residents for 7 days. And finally, Carthage surrendered, and 50,000 Carthaginians were taken into slavery. And the result was now Rome was in control of the entire Western Mediterranean basin. And I just put a note there on the slide that when this war ended, Rome also began pushing east against Philip V of Macedonia. So now we're going to start seeing the Romans move to the east, which is going to be into Turkey, which was at that time was called Anatolia, and then further on into Palestine, and it'll wrap around and through Egypt, and the Roman Empire will pretty much control all of that area. I have a map coming up here. Okay, so on this map, you see the expansion. This is about the 2nd century BC, so it's not completely colored in here what they had, but they controlled a lot of this. So when you think of the end of the Third Punic War, 146 BC, they owned all of this. Here's Rome here. Here's Carthage. So they owned all this. And here's Macedonia. So they're going to move into Macedonia, and then here going over across where it says Asia, that's into Turkey. And then following all the way around into the Holy Land, closer to the time of Christ. And that's it for this PowerPoint. I'll see you in a second. Okay, class, that's good for today. We covered quite a bit of material and detail on the Punic Wars. As I said, this really sets up Rome for becoming the powerhouse empire that they became. Then it's going to develop into some problems. They now have all this territory that they've conquered, and how is it that they administer that, and how is it that they control these lands, and who controls the lands, and that's going to develop further issues that we're going to look at briefly in session 3 coming up here next time. Other than that, that's it for today. Have a great day.